every crime is a wound on the world. We're here to dissect it, layer by layer, to find the truth buried within. This is Anatomy of Crime. The light in Wyoming is different. It's thin and sharp, casting long, dramatic shadows across the sagebrush flats, even in the middle of the day. It's the kind of light that makes the jagged peaks of the Grand Tetons look like a painted backdrop, too perfect to be real. In the summer of 2021, this was the landscape of a dream. A young woman, Gabby Petito, was living that dream, or at least, she was curating the appearance of it for the world to see. Her Instagram feed was a mosaic of sun-drenched canyons, bohemian smiles, and carefully composed shots of her and her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, living out the ultimate fantasy, #vanlife. They were free, untethered, charting a course through America's most stunning national parks in their little white Ford Transit van. Every post, every story, every YouTube video was a breadcrumb, a digital marker of a life lived beautifully and publicly. But somewhere between the filtered sunsets and the cheerful captions, the light began to change. The dream began to fray at the edges, the shadows grew longer, and then, suddenly, there was only silence. The digital breadcrumbs stopped, and in that silence, a terrifying question began to echo across the internet. Where is Gabby? This is a story you think you know. A story of a trip that went horribly wrong, of a young life cut short. But the what is only the beginning of the question. Today, we are not just examining a crime. We are dissecting the very anatomy of a 21st century investigation. A case where the crime scene was not just a remote patch of Wyoming wilderness, but a sprawling, borderless digital landscape. We will explore how an army of online sleuths, armed with nothing more than smartphones and an insatiable curiosity, turned a curated social media feed into a forensic goldmine. This is the story of how thousands of strangers, united by a hashtag, pieced together a puzzle that baffled authorities, and in doing so, forever changed the relationship between the public and the process of justice. This is the anatomy of a social media investigation. To understand how it all ended, we have to go back to the beginning. Not just the beginning of the trip, but the beginning of the relationship that would eventually chart a course toward tragedy. Gabrielle Venora Petito, born March 19, 1999, was from Blue Point, New York, on Long Island. Friends and family describe her as a vibrant, artistic, and free-spirited young woman. She had a magnetic energy, a desire to see the world, and a talent for connecting with people. She was the kind of person who seemed to be perpetually on the verge of her next great adventure. Brian Christopher Laundrie, 2 years her senior, was a fellow Long Islander. They met while attending Bayport Blue Point High School. By all public accounts, their relationship seemed intense and passionate. They were an on-again, off-again couple who, despite the turbulence, always seemed to find their way back to one another. In 2019, they took their first cross-country road trip, a journey from New York to California that seemed to cement their shared love for travel and exploration. The following year, in July of 2020, they announced their engagement on Instagram. A photo of them, beaming, with Gabby showing off her ring. The caption read, "My biggest fan, my greatest conqueror, my funniest adventure buddy, my soulmate, my best friend. Brian asked me to marry him, and I said yes. You make life feel unreal, and every day is such a dream with you." The dream they were building had a specific aesthetic. In late 2020, Gabby purchased a 2012 Ford Transit Connect van. Together, they spent months converting it into a tiny, mobile home. They documented the process, building out a wooden interior, installing a small bed and creating a space that would be their vessel for the ultimate adventure. They launched a YouTube channel called Nomadic Static and a corresponding Instagram account to document their journey. The plan was ambitious: a 4-month trip across the western United States, visiting the country's most iconic national parks. For Gabby, this wasn't just a vacation, it was a potential career. She was an aspiring influencer, hoping to turn her passion for travel and content creation into a sustainable lifestyle. On July 2, 2021, they set out from Blue Point, New York. The first few weeks of their journey unfolded exactly as planned, at least on social media. Their posts depicted a sun-kissed, carefree existence. Photos from Monument Rocks in Kansas, a video of them hiking through the surreal landscapes of Zion National Park in Utah, a smiling selfie at Mystic Hot Springs. They were chasing sunsets, exploring canyons, and living the life that so many people, scrolling through their own feeds, could only dream of. The brand they were building was one of peace, love, and minimalist adventure. But beneath the polished surface of their digital life, a different story was taking shape, one of friction, anxiety, and escalating conflict. The first public fissure in their picture-perfect narrative appeared on August 12, 2021, in the small, tourist-heavy town of Moab, Utah. The events of that day would later be scrutinized with agonizing intensity, becoming a critical piece of evidence not only of their volatile relationship, but of a missed opportunity to intervene. It started with a 911 call. A witness reported seeing a man slapping a woman outside the Moonflower Community Cooperative, a local organic grocery store. The caller told the dispatcher, "We drove by, and the gentleman was slapping the girl. Then we stopped. They ran up and down the sidewalk. He proceeded to hit her, hopped in the van, and they drove off." A short time later, an officer with the Moab City Police Department, Daniel Robbins, spotted the white Ford Transit van driving erratically near the entrance to Arches National Park. He pulled the van over. What followed was captured on police body camera footage, a nearly hour-long interaction that would be viewed by millions around the world weeks later. The video is deeply unsettling. When Officer Robbins approaches the van, he finds Gabby in the passenger seat, sobbing uncontrollably. She is distraught, hyperventilating, and struggling to articulate what happened. Brian, on the other hand, appears calm, almost casual. He has scratches on his face and arm, which he explains away by saying Gabby was fighting him, that she gets worked up sometimes. He tells the officer that they've been traveling together for months, and the emotional strain has been building. He minimizes the initial conflict, framing it as a simple argument that got out of hand because Gabby was stressed about her blog and the cleanliness of the van. Gabby's side of the story is more confused, colored by her obvious emotional distress. She admits to hitting Brian first, but she also tells the officer that he grabbed her face and left a scratch on her cheek. She seems desperate to take the blame, repeatedly telling the officers that she has obsessive-compulsive disorder, and that her anxiety was the root cause of the conflict. "I was just cleaning, and I was apologizing to him, saying, 'I'm sorry that I'm so mean,' she says through tears. 'We've just been fighting this morning, some personal issues.'" The officers on the scene, including a second officer, Eric Pratt, separated the couple and interviewed them. They seemed to focus on Gabby's emotional state and her admission that she had struck Brian. They saw Brian's scratches as evidence that she was the primary aggressor. Despite the initial 911 call reporting that a man had been seen slapping a woman, the officers on scene seemed to conclude that this was not a domestic violence situation, but rather a mental health crisis. Officer Pratt can be heard on the footage telling Gabby, "He doesn't sound like a K-9 cop to me. You know, he sounds like a guy that's traveling with his girlfriend. And he's in a little white van, and he's hot and he's tired." Ultimately, the police made a decision that would become a subject of intense debate and a formal investigation. Instead of making an arrest, which would have been standard procedure under Utah law, given the visible injuries and conflicting stories, they classified the incident as a mental and emotional break. Their solution was to separate the couple for the night. They arranged for Brian to stay in a hotel, while Gabby remained with the van. The body cam footage ends with an officer speaking to a visibly relieved Brian, telling him, "You're not in any trouble." In hindsight, the Moab incident is a chilling portrait of a relationship in crisis. The power imbalance is palpable. Brian is composed and articulate, effectively controlling the narrative. Gabby is overwhelmed and emotional, struggling to explain a dynamic that is clearly causing her immense pain. The footage provides a stark, unfiltered glimpse behind the curated Instagram feed. The smiling couple from the photos was gone, replaced by two people locked in a cycle of toxicity and distress. And yet, after one night apart, they reunited and continued their journey west, deeper into the wilderness, and further away from anyone who could help. After the Moab incident, the couple's journey continued, and so did their social media posts, but a subtle shift was occurring. The frequency of their updates began to dwindle. On August 19th, they posted their final YouTube video, titled "Van Life," beginning our van life journey. The video is an 8-minute montage of smiling clips from the beginning of their trip. It's upbeat, set to whimsical indie music, and portrays a completely carefree existence. In the context of what was to come, it feels like a piece of fiction, a final, desperate attempt to project an image of happiness that was rapidly disintegrating. The last confirmed sighting of Gabby Petito alive was on August 24th, when she and Brian were seen checking out of a hotel in Salt Lake City. On August 25th, she had her last FaceTime call with her mother, Nicole Schmidt. Gabby told her they were leaving Utah and heading to Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. That same day, she posted her final photos to her Instagram account. The pictures show her smiling, holding a small crocheted pumpkin, with the caption, "Happy Halloween." It was a strangely timed post for late August, and one that online sleuths would later analyze endlessly for hidden meaning. Was it a coded message, or simply a quirky pre-scheduled post? We will likely never know. Over the next few days, a series of strange and sporadic text messages were sent from Gabby's phone to her mother. On August 27th, a text read, "Can you help Stan? I just keep getting his voicemails and missed calls." Stan is Gabby's grandfather, but referring to him by his first name was highly uncharacteristic for her, raising immediate suspicion for her mother. The final text came on August 30th. It simply read, "No service in Yosemite." This message was even more alarming. The couple had no known plans to be in Yosemite, which is hundreds of miles and a multi-day drive from their last known location in the Grand Tetons. Her family now firmly believes that these last texts were not sent by Gabby at all. Then, on September 1st, something happened that made no sense. Brian Laundrie arrived back at his parents' home in Northport, Florida. He was alone, and he was driving Gabby's van. He offered no explanation for Gabby's absence. He and his parents, Christopher and Roberta Laundrie, hired a lawyer and refused to speak to anyone, including the Petito family. For 10 agonizing days, Gabby's parents tried frantically to contact the Laundries, begging for information about their daughter's whereabouts. Their calls and texts went unanswered. The silence from the Laundrie family was absolute, a stone wall of indifference that only amplified the growing panic. On September 11, 2021, after 10 days of unbearable silence, Nicole Schmidt officially reported her daughter missing to the Suffolk County Police Department in New York. The Northport Police in Florida were notified, and the official investigation began. They went to the Laundrie home, but the family refused to cooperate, directing all inquiries to their lawyer. The police seized the white van from the property for forensic processing. The search for Gabby Petito was now a national news story. As law enforcement began their formal, by-the-book investigation, a different kind of investigation was exploding online. The story of the beautiful young vlogger who had vanished while living out a social media fantasy was irresistible catnip for the internet. On platforms like TikTok, YouTube, Reddit, and Instagram, a global community of amateur detectives began to form. They were united by the hashtag Gabby Petito, and they set to work with a fervor and a collective intelligence that was staggering. This is where the anatomy of this case truly becomes unique. The public was not just a passive audience. They became active participants in the search. They didn't have badges or warrants, but they had something else, a massive crowdsourced database of every digital breadcrumb Gabby and Brian had ever left behind. They treated the couple's social media feeds like a primary crime scene. Every photo was scrutinized for reflections in sunglasses, for background details, for geotags that might reveal a hidden location. They analyzed the captions for changes in tone or language. They cross-referenced Spotify playlists for songs that might hint at their state of mind. They stitched together timelines with a level of detail that would rival any police department's intelligence unit. They became digital archaeologists, digging through layers of curated content to find the unvarnished truth. They noticed that Gabby, who was usually the one managing the social media accounts, had fallen silent, while Brian's activity, though sparse, had continued. They debated the meaning of the strange final text messages, comparing the syntax to Gabby's previous writing style. They unearthed the Moab bodycam footage, and millions of people watched it, dissecting every word, every gesture, forming their own opinions about the dynamic between the couple and the actions of the police. The online community wasn't just analyzing old data, they were generating new leads in real time. This case demonstrated the power of the 6 degrees of separation theory in the digital age. It seemed that almost everyone had a potential connection. A friend of a friend who might have been in the same national park at the same time. People scoured their own vacation photos and dashcam footage, hoping to find a glimpse of the little white van, and incredibly, they did. The first major breakthrough to come from the online community came from a woman named Miranda Baker. On September 17th, she posted a series of videos on TikTok that quickly went viral. In the videos, she claimed that she and her boyfriend had picked up a hitchhiker on August 29th in Coulter Bay, Wyoming, who they were now certain was Brian Laundrie. She described him as acting antsy and strange. According to Baker, when he found out they were heading to Jackson Hole instead of further south, he freaked out and asked to be let out of the car, getting out near the Jackson Lake Dam. Her story provided a crucial piece of the timeline for Brian's movements after Gabby was last heard from, and it placed him alone, on foot, in the Grand Teton area. But the most significant breakthrough, the tip that would lead investigators directly to Gabby's remains, came not from a TikToker, but from a family of fellow van life YouTubers, Jen and Kyle Bethune, who run the channel Red, White, and Bethune, had been traveling through Wyoming in late August. Like so many others, they were following the case online. On the evening of September 18th, Jen was editing footage from their trip. She was looking for a specific clip, and as she scrolled through her camera roll, she saw it, a shot of a small white Ford Transit van parked on the side of a dirt road. At first, she didn't think much of it. White vans are common in the van life community, but something about it stuck with her. She went back and looked closer. She could see the Florida license plates. She noted the details. A small black ladder on the back, stickers on the window. It matched Gabby's van exactly. The Bethunes checked the date and location data on their video file. The footage was taken on the evening of August 27th around 6:30 p.m. at the Spread Creek Dispersed Camping Area on the edge of Grand Teton National Park. This was an area that had not yet been a major focus of the official search. They realized the potential significance of what they had found. This was video evidence of Gabby's van, parked in a specific remote location 2 days after her last confirmed conversation with her family. They immediately contacted the FBI. Kyle Bethune described the moment to reporters. "I got a chill down my spine. I was like, oh my God." I looked at my wife and I was like, this is the van. Their tip was a game changer. It gave law enforcement a precise, targeted area to search within the vast Wyoming wilderness. The very next day, Sunday, September 19th, the FBI and National Park Service agents descended on the Spread Creek Dispersed Camping Area. They cordoned off the site and began a methodical grid search. It didn't take long. That afternoon, authorities made a grim announcement. They had found human remains consistent with the description of Gabby Petito. The digital Dragnet, the collective effort of thousands of strangers online, had led them to her. 2 days later, the Teton County coroner confirmed the identity through an autopsy. The cause of death was ruled a homicide. The specific method, manual strangulation. The vibrant, smiling young woman from the Instagram photos had been murdered. The discovery of Gabby Petito's body transformed a missing persons case into a nationwide manhunt. The sole person of interest was Brian Laundrie. But by the time Gabby was found, Brian was already gone. His parents had told Northport police on September 17th that they had not seen their son since September 14th. They claimed he had told them he was going for a hike in the nearby Carlton Reserve, a sprawling 25,000-acre wilderness area filled with swamps, dense vegetation, and dangerous wildlife like alligators and venomous snakes. The story seemed suspicious from the start. The timeline provided by the parents appeared to shift. First, they said he left on the 14th. Then later, their lawyer stated he had left on the 13th. The fact that they waited 3 days to report their own son missing, especially while he was the center of a national media firestorm, was seen by the public and law enforcement as deeply deceptive. The search for Gabby Petito was now a search for Brian Laundrie. The Carlton Reserve became the new epicenter of the case. For over a month, law enforcement agencies conducted a massive and exhaustive search of the reserve. They used search and rescue teams, K-9 units, drones, and all-terrain vehicles. The conditions were brutal. Much of the area was underwater due to recent heavy rains. Searchers waded through chest-deep, murky water, contending with the heat, humidity, and the constant threat of the reserve's native inhabitants. The search was incredibly difficult and expensive, costing millions of dollars, yet it yielded nothing. Brian Laundrie had seemingly vanished into the swamp. While the physical search was underway, the digital manhunt continued with even greater intensity. A federal arrest warrant was issued for Brian, not for Gabby's murder, but for the fraudulent use of her debit card in the days following her death. This legal maneuver allowed the FBI to officially classify him as a fugitive. His face was everywhere. Digital billboards across the country displayed his picture. Theories about his whereabouts ran rampant online. Some believed he was hiding in a secret bunker under his parents' flower bed. Others were convinced he had fled the country, possibly to Cuba or the Bahamas. The reality TV star Dog the Bounty Hunter even joined the search in Florida, adding a surreal, circus-like element to the already frenzied media coverage. The public's anger was increasingly directed at Brian's parents, Christopher and Roberta Laundrie. Their silence, their lack of cooperation, and their perceived deception fueled widespread outrage. Protesters gathered daily outside their Northport home, chanting justice for Gabby and demanding that the Laundries tell the world what they knew. The Petito family, in their public statements, pleaded with the Laundries to break their silence. Gabby's father, Joe Petito, said, "What I need is for his parents to stop hiding behind a lawyer and tell us what they know. I want to see them in a jail cell." Week after week, the search for Brian in the Carlton Reserve continued with no results. The case grew colder, and a sense of frustration began to set in. It seemed possible that he might never be found, that the full story of what happened in Wyoming would remain buried with Gabby. But then, on October 20th, there was a sudden and unexpected development. The Carlton Reserve had finally begun to dry out as floodwaters receded. Brian's parents, who had not previously participated in the search, announced through their lawyer that they wanted to go to the reserve to look for their son themselves. They met law enforcement at the Miakahatchee Creek Environmental Park, which connects to the reserve. They pointed investigators to a trail that they said Brian frequented, and within a very short time, a discovery was made. In an area that had previously been underwater, investigators found a white dry bag and a backpack belonging to Brian. Nearby they found partial human remains. Dental records would later confirm that the remains belonged to Brian Laundrie. After a 5-week, multi-million-dollar manhunt that had captivated the nation, Brian was found less than a 2-mile walk from his parents' home. The medical examiner would ultimately rule his death a suicide, caused by a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. The discovery of Brian's body provided a grim end to the manhunt, but it did not provide immediate answers about what happened to Gabby. The key to that mystery was found with his remains. Alongside the backpack and dry bag, investigators recovered a small, water-damaged notebook. The FBI's evidence recovery team managed to salvage its contents. In the pages of that notebook, Brian Laundrie had written his final confession. In a multi-page entry, he laid out his version of Gabby's final hours. He claimed that on their last day together, Gabby had fallen into a creek during a difficult, hurried hike back to their van in the dark. According to his account, she was injured, freezing cold, and in extreme pain. He wrote that he carried her as far as he could, but he couldn't get her across the rushing creek. He claimed she was gasping in pain, begging for an end to her pain. He wrote, "I ended her life. I thought it was merciful, that it is what she wanted, but I see now all the mistakes I made. I panicked. I was in shock." He went on to describe his own subsequent actions as a desperate, grief-stricken flight. He claimed he raced home to spend his remaining time with his family, and that he chose to take his own life in the wilderness, not because of guilt, but because he couldn't bear to live without her. "I am ending my life, not because of a fear of punishment," he wrote, "but rather because I can't stand to live another day without her." This narrative of a tragic accident followed by a so-called mercy killing, was the only direct account of Gabby's death, but it stands in stark and chilling contrast to the forensic evidence. The Teton County coroner was unequivocal in his findings. Gabby Petito died of manual strangulation. It was not a gentle, merciful act. It was a violent, intimate, and brutal crime that would have taken several minutes to commit. The act of strangulation is the ultimate assertion of power and control, a far cry from the compassionate act Brian described in his notebook. His confession was, in the eyes of the Petito family and many legal experts, a self-serving, final attempt to control the narrative and cast himself as a tragic, heartbroken figure rather than a violent killer. With Brian Laundrie's death and confession, the criminal investigation into Gabby Petito's murder was officially closed. But the legal and emotional fallout was far from over. The Petito family filed a civil lawsuit against Christopher and Roberta Laundrie, alleging that they knew their son had murdered Gabby and were actively helping him evade capture. The lawsuit claimed that a statement released by the Laundrie's lawyer on September 14th, in which they expressed hope that Gabby would be found, was intentionally malicious and caused the Petito family extreme emotional distress, as they allegedly knew she was already dead. The case has been a contentious and emotionally charged battle, forcing a legal examination of what responsibility, if any, a family has when they suspect their child has committed a terrible crime. Separately, the Petito family also filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the Moab City Police Department for their handling of the August 12th domestic violence call. The suit alleges that the officers failed to properly investigate the incident, misidentified Gabby as the primary aggressor, and neglected their duty to protect her, which could have saved her life. This legal action has placed a national spotlight on police training for domestic violence situations and the challenges officers face in correctly identifying the victim in a volatile encounter. In the wake of their unimaginable loss, Gabby's family has channeled their grief into action. They established the Gabby Petito Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to providing resources for the families of missing persons and supporting organizations that assist victims of domestic violence. They have become powerful advocates, using the platform they never asked for to create a legacy for their daughter that is defined not by her death, but by the help and hope she can provide to others. And so we are left with the final image, a young woman who sought to capture the beauty of the world, whose life was stolen from her in one of its most beautiful places, a young man who curated an image of adventure and love, while hiding a darkness that ultimately consumed them both. But the story's final chapter is not just about them. It's about us. It's about the millions of people who felt they knew Gabby Petito, who joined the search from behind their screens, and who proved that in the digital age, no one simply disappears without a trace. This case provides the quintessential anatomy of a social media investigation. It was a double-edged sword. On one hand, the collective power of the Internet was astonishing. The Bethune's discovery of the van footage is an undeniable testament to the power of crowdsourcing. The digital Dragnet moved faster, processed more data, and generated more leads than any traditional investigation could have alone. It created a level of pressure on law enforcement and on the Laundrie family that was relentless and inescapable. It ensured that Gabby's story was never relegated to a local news brief, but remained a national priority until she was found. Yet this phenomenon also has a darker side. The online frenzy led to rampant speculation, the spread of misinformation, and the harassment of individuals who were only tangentially related to the case. People who resembled Brian Laundrie were accosted in public. The Laundrie family, regardless of their moral culpability, became targets of a vitriolic and sometimes dangerous mob mentality. The line between civic duty and digital vigilantism became perilously thin. This case forces us to confront a new reality. We live our lives through a digital lens, leaving a trail of posts, tags, and check-ins that create a permanent public archive of our existence. We project curated versions of ourselves, sharing our triumphs and editing out our struggles. Gabby Petito's story is a harrowing reminder that the curated life is often an illusion. The bright, sunlit world of a social media feed can obscure a reality that is dark, dangerous, and broken. Her digital breadcrumbs, meant to document a dream, instead became the forensic evidence of a nightmare, a map that led the world to the truth she was no longer able to tell. Her legacy is a tragic one, but it is also a powerful warning, echoing from the silent wilderness, about the darkness that can hide in plain sight, just one click away from a picture-perfect life. This has been Anatomy of Crime, where the truth is never simple, but always worth seeking.